Okay, so I will start. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon. I am Dr. Fahmida Kaur and I am your MRCOG Part 2 mentor at MedHome Group for today. First of all, I would like to thank MedHome Group for giving and creating this opportunity for our people, for our candidates who are really desperate to aspire all these international degrees, MRCOG, MRCP, and either due to lack of resources and many other reasons. It's not like that they are not able to, but somewhere are getting delayed. So MedHome has started this platform to help them in very reasonable way and with no compromise in quality. That we will see inshallah throughout our course. The other thing now, I would like to congratulate all of you for accomplishment of part 1 and for the next stage of your life, which is like this box. And this will open definitely with hard work and great challenge. And for this, MedHome is there for you at every step to fulfill this challenge and to come out with flying colors, inshallah. The thing is, I did my MRCOG and MRCP Ireland. So what I feel, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And if anyone can do it, you can definitely do it. So MRCOG or MRCP Ireland, it is nothing like we cannot do it or it is something a dream. Only it needs like dedication, dedicated efforts for which MedHome is there for all of you and at every step. What is our agenda today? Like, first of all, we will see, most of us, we know already, actually, there are so many resources and website itself is there, which is self-explanatory about what is this part 2 exam. But still, we will go just, we will see in brief. Then we will just have a glimpse of syllabus, what is for part 2 exam. The most important thing what we are going to do in today's lecture is how to approach guidelines and small tips, you know, which will help us to, means how to read the guideline with exam point of view. We read guidelines, but when we sit and we see our single best answer or EMQs, suddenly it comes to our brain, oh, I have read it, but what was it? Very small point, we get stuck there. That is the trick, what inshallah biiznillah you will see in our all today and throughout lectures, how to click that point. That is small tip, that is small trick is needed, for which the some of our people, they lack it and they cannot go through in first attempt, like that. So what is basically this MRCOG Part 2 exam? The format is, it consists of two types of questions. One is single best answer and one is extended matching questions. Now in part 1, most of us, most of you are already, you have idea about this single best answers, and now the new part 1 has already introduced even extended matching questions also. The thing is, this extended matching question, it is nightmare for most of us, because what happens, you read a big scenario of 1 page, 1.5 page, and by the time you reach to end, there is a big line of multiple answers, and which is really confusing. When you reach to end, again you forget like what you have read in the beginning and what the question is asking. So there is some trick in that also, which we will see gradually. Marking system is like, for single best answer, there is 40% weightage. For extended matching question is 60% weightage. And another one more important thing, whenever we go for this exam, after that we start calculating that we have done this many questions, this many EMQs and all. Actually, their marking system is totally different. It is like statistically, they have organized one team and they have this blueprint system according to the difficulty of question. If some question, if 90% have done it correct, means that is easy question, so it will have less weightage. But some question, if most of the candidates were not able to do, so that was hard question and it will have more weightage. It is like that. The marking distribution is like that. After that, it comes syllabus. Now for syllabus. mini courses, what they tell and what I know, that whenever any material, anything we provide in our course, then it will be told to the candidates that no need to go through guidelines and all. But I'm very sorry, I don't agree with that. There is no option, no other way other than reading guidelines. Whatever we do courses, we get material, we go through it, but some guidelines which is must to read is all green top guidelines. Some of the nice guidelines, which is obstetrical in gyneco, that syllabus in detail we will write in our future classes. Then some of the talks. Usually people, they say that recent 3 years talks are must to do, but some of old talks which are like pet for RCOG, you know, every exam you will see questions from them, like headache, like asthma, like myocardial infarction, SLE, all these things. Some important, that trick has to be there, that what important talks to go through plus last 3 years talk. After that, it comes your FSRH guidelines, then BASH guidelines. Not, of course, not all FSRH, but some of it, and BASH guidelines and colposcopy. In every exam you see pap smear, you see all kind of, like, once it comes in exam, and when you look at the question, unless you have thoroughly read that National Health Sciences colposcopy guideline, you feel it is something like, you know, Chinese letters in front of your eyes. It looks like that when the question comes. So that again and again you have to revise it. Plus it comes Stratog. When you read any guideline, what I feel, what I have done, that suppose if I took one guideline, let us say like today, what we are going to discuss, our NICE hypertension guideline. So go to Stratog tutorial and see where is this NICE guideline. It is in antepartum module. Try to finish one complete module. And related to that module, whatever GTGs, whatever talk you find important talk, try to do all together, and at the same time do Stratog question answers and some important books, which definitely we will give you some list of the books what are common everywhere there on internet and all, like Andrew Sizer, like that. So do question answers without seeing answers. When you mark some questions, you cannot do it first attempt, go back to it again, go back to it again. So like that is the way where you will day by day, gradually, you will get the trick how to approach. Once you do one guideline, sit and do EMQs. You will see in the beginning 50% of EMQs you will not be able to do. Why? Because when we read and when we see questions, then our approach towards that guideline, it changes completely. So that gradually we will again and again we will stress on this point. Again, Stratog, when we read some guideline and we read Stratog, it looks like simplified. Stratog has given same thing but in simple way. So we revise it for ourselves, it becomes like a revision. And when you do the questions and all, you get the idea that on this topic, what kind of EMQ and what kind of SBA can come. And whatever Stratog questions, SBAs and EMQs are being given there, those all are important. In every exam, you will see from there EMQs and SBAs. And of course, not last but not least, but the last is recalls. After everything all together, the most and the last, the first and the last thing is practice. It needs like practice and practice. Whatever courses and all we do, without practice, it will not be possible. So we will start our today's challenge. What is hypertension in pregnancy? This is our new NICE guideline, which is in 2019. Actually, those who have read the old guideline and this new one, there are some changes in this, which throughout our slides, I will keep on mentioning that point, where is the new amendment. Those who are reading this first time, so it is khalas. They will not feel any change in it. Just in the beginning, just to have some, is it okay? Can I continue the same speed? I am fast, slow, anything, any comment?
Yeah, yes, super. You're doing good.
Thank you, my dear. So a brief introduction about these hypertensive conditions. Usually, it is what we say in pregnancy, gestational hypertension or preeclampsia, eclampsia. The first thing comes chronic hypertension. So whatever hypertension which comes in second half of pregnancy, which is after 20 weeks. So that will come our gestational hypertension. preeclampsia, eclampsia. So it complicates 2 to 8% of pregnancies. Preeclampsia is a major cause of maternal and perinatal morbidity and mortality, that we all know it, and worldwide causing 15% of all direct maternal deaths in UK and 5-fold increase in perinatal mortality with iatrogenic prematurity, because we delivered them earlier, no? So prematurity, mostly it is iatrogenic. So this is the main culprit. Now with part 2 point of view, these percentages are very important, especially for MRCOG. MRCP Ireland, they don't still, till now they didn't learn this from MRCOG. They are still not well versed in these percentages, but for MRCOG point of view, all the percentages are very important. Now, all of us, we know preeclampsia is a heterogeneous multi-system disorder. Just 1 second. Baba, please. Okay, done. Thank you. Okay, so as we said, preeclampsia, it is a heterogeneous multi-system disorder. In general, maternal and perinatal outcomes are usually favorable when it is mild and it develops after 36 weeks. But the risk of serious maternal and perinatal morbidity and mortality increases significantly when it develops prior to 33 weeks. And especially in those who are already with some pre-existing medical condition and those who are from, unfortunately, unresourced. Okay, now classification, we will go. First is like which presents before 20 weeks. That is chronic hypertension, white coat hypertension, and masked hypertension, means it is initially masked due to certain things and all, and later on it appears. Now in chronic, there is essential and secondary. 90% of the hypertensions are essential and 10% remaining secondary, which we can see what are the causes of secondary hypertension. And the most important culprit which arises after 20 weeks, that is our preeclampsia or superimposed on chronic hypertension or purely preeclampsia, gestational hypertension and transient gestational hypertension. Now, secondary hypertension, as we said, we will see the causes. Either it can be idiopathic, which is essential, then some vascular disorders, endocrine disorders, autoimmune disorders. In vascular, we have renal causes, aortic coarctation, then whatever the conditions which will involve vessels and immunological things in the body, that comes diabetes, thyroid, our pheochromocytoma, Cushing's and Cohen's syndrome, plus our renal diseases, as we said, due to diabetes, due to chronic hypertension, chronic glomerulonephritis, polycystic kidneys, which is congenital, and in the end, again, our autoimmune, which is connective tissue disorders like SLE, sclerosis, and rheumatoid arthritis. Here we start our nice, that was brief introduction, which I have taken from Stratton. So now we will start with our nice guideline, which we are going to discuss in detail. Now you may see many slides. The problem is there is nothing in NICE which we can omit. Another important point in this NICE guideline is many EMQs comes from NICE. So unless we follow this guideline, it is a bit difficult to approach towards EMQs. Basic concept should be clear, because how the trick with very small point tricky question comes and there we get confused. Oh, we have read like this. That time we get confused. So that concept should be clear, that we will try our best today, how far we can do it. So initially they have given some recommendation in the guideline, that is some antiplatelet agents, then to advise pregnant women at high risk of preeclampsia to take 75 to 150 milligram of aspirin daily from 12 weeks until the birth of baby. Initially, they used to say to start to stop at 36 weeks and descended, but now they can take it till birth. And women at high risk are those with any of the following conditions. What is the criteria? The one, those who are with hypertensive diseases during their previous, this is now high risk group, what we are talking. So those who are with hypertension in previous pregnancy, those who are already with some chronic kidney disease, autoimmune diseases like SLE, antiphospholipid syndrome, type 1 and 2 diabetes, and already with chronic hypertension. Okay, this is the amendment from 2019. Now, that was what we saw, that was high risk factors. Now, more than one moderate risk factors. Those who are with previous one, what we saw, high risk single factor. Now, if more than one moderate risk factors, they will be advised to take 75 to 150 milligram of aspirin daily from 12 weeks. What is this moderate risk factors? Now here, there are 6 points, but we will try to simplify it for ourselves to remember. How to simplify it? See, first is women herself. So, her age, that is 40 or older. Then, her body mass index, which is 35 or more. This is related to women. Then, it comes her family. So, any history, family history of any preeclampsia in her mother, in her sister, first degree relative. This we reach to the second point. Now the third thing will come related to pregnancy. Okay. So what is the pregnancy points are there? Either this is the first pregnancy, either the pregnancy interval is more than 10 years, or either it is multifetal pregnancy. Okay. So if we make it simplify for ourselves, it will be easy to remember, easy to bring it out. First, woman herself, either she's 40 years or more. Then her body mass index, it is 35 or more. Then her family history, her first degree relative with preeclampsia. We finished 3 points. Now remaining 3 points related to pregnancy. Either it is first pregnancy, either this pregnancy interval more than 10 years, or this is multifetal pregnancy. So any of more than one, these are moderate risk factors. So more than one factor, they will be advised to take aspirin 75 to 150 milligram from 12 weeks. So we saw high risk factors, we already saw moderate risk factors, and we tried our best to simplify it, how to remember it. Now, there are certain things like nutritional supplements, it is said, but there is as such no evidence that it helps in reducing the blood pressure. There is, so solely for blood pressure control purpose, there should not be recommended to take any of the supplements. What is it? Magnesium, folic acid, antioxidants, fish oil, any dietary changes, to tell them like that. It will come in further slides about the diet, like it should not be salt restricted diet. We should not advise them to take salt restricted diet. It will come in further slides. Then we should not tell them to do like complete bed rest and like those kind of things. And the diabetes, there is total complete one very huge guideline of the same, nice to have the details of it. So there is no evidence of any nutritional supplement recommendation solely for purpose of blood pressure. Okay. Now, the first thing comes whenever we suspect any blood pressure in pregnancy, those other than those who are known hypertensive, what we assess? We assess proteinuria. So there is some criteria according to NICE to assess this proteinuria. So what they have given, interpret proteinuria measurement for pregnant women in the context of a full clinical review of symptoms, signs, and other investigations of preeclampsia. Why this sentence is there? Because suppose if any woman comes with loin pain, and if we do urine analysis for her, there will be protein. If we do dipstick, there will be protein. So rather than just taking it as a sign of PET and all, we have to assess the whole scenario, clinical symptoms, other signs, and other investigations of preeclampsia. So this proteinuria should not be taken sole agent of as an indication of PET, with other clinical symptoms, signs, and together with other investigations of preeclampsia. Okay, now when we are doing it, with what to be done? It should be an automated reagent strip reading device for dipstick. Now, and this should be done where? It should be done in secondary care setting. Now, these small points are very important. This automated reagent strip device and secondary care setting, because here the tricky question comes. So this we should keep in mind, that wherever now we are doing now this proteinuria testing with automated reagent device, automatically patient is reaching to secondary care. Then now if dipstick screening is positive, which is 1+ or more. So initially, this is the amendment from our previous guideline 2010. Previously, 24-hour urine protein collection was gold standard method. But now they have 1 minute, just 1 minute. What happened? Oh, it's okay, no problem. Okay, so now we did dipstick. If it came 1 plus or more, then amendment is we are supposed to do albumin creatinine ratio or protein creatinine ratio to quantify proteinuria in pregnant women. This is the amendment if new guideline. Okay, now again they have given, do not use first morning urine void to quantify proteinuria in pregnant women. This is again amendment new one. Why? Because what is said that the early morning sample, fasting sample is not the good indicator of proteinuria. That it is written there in all their details if we read, which no one has time to read that detailed thing. Now again, another thing, do not use 24-hour urine collection to quantify proteinuria in pregnant women. As we said, this is old recommendation. 24-hour urine protein was gold standard, but now they have changed it to urine protein, which is albumin creatinine or protein creatinine ratio, which the details of which we will see. If using protein creatinine ratio to quantify proteinuria in pregnant women, use 30 milligram per millimole as a threshold for significant proteinuria. Okay, 30 milligram per millimole. Now here again one tricky point. There are two values and two things. One is protein creatinine, other one is albumin creatinine. So we should not get confused in these two things because values are different. If it is protein creatinine, it is 30 milligram per millimole. 30 milligram per millimole. If it is albumin creatinine, it is 8 milligram per millimole. Okay, so these two are again very small but very important point. So when we are taking protein creatinine to quantify proteinuria, 30 milligram as a threshold for significant proteinuria. But if the result is 30 milligram per millimole or above, and there is still uncertainty about the diagnosis of preeclampsia, consider retesting on a new sample alongside the clinical review. Because suppose if the patient is very asymptomatic, blood pressure only one reading, maybe that was white coat hypertension, she just came very stressed out, suddenly nurse jumped, she checked her blood pressure, it came high, we did proteinuria came high, but later on nothing. So again we have to revise and we can consider retesting. Now the second is albumin creatinine as an alternative to protein creatinine ratio to diagnose with hypertension. What is that? 8 milligram per millimole as a diagnostic threshold. If again the same thing, if it comes 8 milligram or above and there is uncertainty of the diagnosis, we can consider retesting. So these small points write down somewhere, because when you revise, there is no time to go through all these details again, and these small points will help you for your quick last minute revision. Now, as in that guideline, there are three parts. One is chronic hypertension, another one is gestational hypertension, and third one is preeclampsia, eclampsia. So we will start first with chronic hypertension in pregnancy. Those already with chronic hypertension in pregnancy. So what will be the pre-pregnancy advice for them? Always, whenever we see any pregnant women, to think the whole scenario: preconception, antenatal, intrapartum, postnatal. Especially this point is very important for part 3. Inshallah, soon we all will reach that stage. So preconception advice. What is preconception? Offer women with chronic hypertension referral to a specialist in hypertensive disorders of pregnancy to discuss the risk and benefits of treatment. So automatically she will not be seen in primary care setting. She will be going to secondary care setting where there is a specialist, referral to a specialist who is specialized in hypertensive disorders of pregnancy to discuss what? To discuss risk and benefits of the treatment, or if there is any change in treatment is needed, because most of the non-essential hypertension, those who are with secondary hypertension due to any kidney disease and all, most of them are on ACE inhibitors or ARBs, angiotensin 2 receptor blockers and all. These medications need to be changed. So there is an increased risk of congenital abnormalities if these drugs are taken in pregnancy. So to discuss the alternatives of it, so they are supposed to be referred. Now to discuss alternative treatment with healthcare professional responsible for managing their condition, and if if they are taking these AC inhibitors or ARBs due to some other reason, not because of sole hypertension, maybe some renal disease, and also some alternative option definitely has to be sorted out for them. Now, stop antihypertensive treatment in women with AC inhibitors or ARBs if they become pregnant, preferably within 2 working days, and offer alternative. This within 2 working days is critical point here. These 2 working days will come again for something else also in our guideline further. We will see if someone has read this guideline. 2 working days, preferably within 2 working days to be stopped. Then those who are on thiazide derivatives and all diuretics, that again to explain to them that again there is possibility of anomalies and neonatal complications if these drugs are taken during pregnancy. Same thing to discuss alternatives and further if they are planning pregnancy, because preconception, no, this is, so they are supposed to be other alternatives. They should see their specialist and to change it. Then, sorry, one more point was there. Then advise women who take antihypertensive treatment other than AC inhibitors, ARBs, thiazides or thiazide-like derivatives that the limited evidence has not shown an increased risk of congenital malformation. Other than these 3 things, if something other than that they are taking anything else, they should not be terrified, just run today and change your things and all. No, there is no evidence about their having their effect on congenital malformation. Now, we finished the preconception part. Now we came to treatment of chronic hypertension. So what should be the advice? The most important is weight management, exercise, healthy eating, and lowering the amount of salt in their diet. As we read earlier, they should not be told that salt restriction diet. No, it should be salt lowering, low amount of salt in the diet. Then whatever antihypertensive they are taking, continue with existing antihypertensive treatment if it is safe. If it is not safe, they will liaise with their specialist and they will switch on to alternative treatment. Unless, now here is the tricky point, sustained systolic blood pressure is less than 110 or sustained diastolic blood pressure is less than 70. Or the woman has symptomatic hypertension. Other than these conditions, whatever woman with her antihypertensive which is safe in pregnancy, she will continue. So this is the advice for chronic hypertension: weight reduction, exercise, healthy eating, salt lowering, continue with antihypertensive as long as it is safe, unless systolic is going less than 110, diastolic is getting less than 70, or she has recurrent attacks of symptomatic hypotension. So now what should be the treatment for them? Offer antihypertensive treatment who have chronic hypertension and who are not already on treatment if they have sustained systolic blood pressure 140 or higher or diastolic blood pressure 90 or higher. Here, what is the point now? Some of the patients, they are known hypertensive, but they are not only significant treatment. They say, just doctor, we are just exercising, lowering salt in the diet and we are managing it. In such type of patients, when the blood pressure systolic is more than 140, diastolic more than 90, that time 90 or more, and 140 and more. This is again important point, because sometimes we just read above 140. No, they will give very tricky question. Now she presented to you, her blood pressure is 140, 90. That time we get confused. Oh, we have read more than 140 or 140. We have read more than 90 or 90. So this is the point. Blood pressure of 140 or higher, diastolic is 90 or higher. So there we have to start the treatment. Now to start the treatment, there should be some target. What should be the target? Blood pressure 135/85. This is again important value, because the values are changing as the hypertension is changing from chronic to gestational, gestational to PET. These values are changing. So this is very important point. You have to note down. Now, what to consider first line, second line, third line? Consider labetalol as a first line. This is NICE guideline. So second is nifedipine for women in whom labetalol is not suitable, or methyl dopa if both labetalol and nifedipine are not suitable. So what it tells us, first line is labetalol, second is nifedipine, and third is methyl dopa. This is based on the side effects and patient tolerability. Now choice on any pre-existing treatment, side effect profile, risk, and women's preference. If some woman is already on methyl dopa and she is tolerating it well and it suits her, and also in that case definitely we will not jump and change it to labetalol, but the first option is labetalol. Now, offer pregnant women with chronic hypertension aspirin 75 to 150 milligram once daily from 12 weeks. That we have seen already in high and moderate risk factors. Now this is new thing which is amendment in 2019 guideline. Placental growth factor based testing to help to rule out preeclampsia between 20 weeks and up to 35 weeks of pregnancy if women with chronic hypertension are suspected of developing preeclampsia. If we are suspecting that this patient is going to develop preeclampsia, in that case we can do placental growth factor testing. It is, I don't think it is widely available, but this is the recommendation. They have given values not directly in that guideline, but if we read the details there, they have given the value is in picogram. Picogram value is less than 12 to 100 and more than 100. If it is less than 12, they are telling that it is highly sensitive of prediction of preeclampsia, that there are more patients are high risk to develop preeclampsia. So this we have to mug up again with all our this management with blood with the antihypertensive with aspirin. This is chronic hypertension. Aspirin, antihypertensive choice, first line, second line, third line, and then this is our placental growth factor testing, those who are at high risk of suspected to develop preeclampsia. Now, how to manage their, we did already, if we try to remember step by step, we will not forget any point. Patient came, preconception, we saw her, we advised her, lifestyle, diet, everything. We reviewed her medication, change in her medication, she was referred to a specialist. Now we started her medicine, we started aspirin, we excluded that she is not high risk for preeclampsia based on placental growth factor. Now how she will follow up? Because she will follow up antenatal appointment. So this appointment, weekly appointment, if her blood pressure is poorly controlled, and every 2 to 4 weeks if her hypertension is well controlled. Again, this is important slide. Now we managed everything and we reached to her delivery. We managed her antenatal, everything. Now we reach to delivery. Timing of birth. Do not offer planned early birth before 37 weeks to women with chronic hypertension whose blood pressure is lower than 160/110 with or without antihypertensive treatment unless there are other medical conditions. This was there in 2010, again it is here in 2019. So, means as long as the blood pressure is lower than 160/110 with or without medication, should not be offered planned early birth. Early is what? Before 37 weeks. Second point, for women with chronic hypertension whose blood pressure is lower than 160/110, after 37 weeks, with or without antihypertensive treatment, timing of birth and maternal and fetal indication for birth should be agreed between women and senior obstetrician. Senior obstetrician, this is again another important point. And the third thing, if we plan birth early, if it is necessary, so we have to offer them antenatal corticosteroid and magnesium sulfate. For this, there is again another guideline, preterm labor and birth of NICE guideline. So that details will be seen there. Or in the end, if we have time, we can just go through it quickly. So chronic hypertension, patient is well managed, timing of birth should be, as long as the blood pressure is controlled. Control is what? It is less than 160/110. Offer birth after 37 only, not before 37, unless there is no other medical indication like IUGR or any other patient's own complication, like it is secondary hypertension, it was already renal failure, something like that. If we are offering birth before 37 weeks, according to NICE guideline related to her gestational age, corticosteroid and magnesium sulfate as per the gestation age, as per NICE recommendation. When we waited till 37 weeks, we crossed the 37 weeks. Now when to plan? When to plan? That will be senior obstetrician involvement. 3 points on this slide. Once we delivered, delivery finished, now postnatal investigations, monitoring and treatment. So in women with chronic hypertension who have given birth, measurement of blood pressure. Here again, there are different measurement patterns are there when we see chronic hypertension, when we see gestational hypertension, and when we see preeclampsia. So this is little bit important, that's why I have highlighted it. In chronic hypertension, after delivery, blood pressure monitoring daily for first 2 days after birth, then at least once between day 3 and day 5 after birth, And after that, as clinically indicated, if antihypertensive treatment is changed after birth. Okay, this is postnatal. And what will be the aim? Aim to keep blood pressure lower than 140/90. Antenatally, our target was to keep blood pressure 135/85. Postnatally, we are trying to keep the blood pressure lower than 140/90. These small blood pressure things are different in each hypertension. So that's why little bit I have highlighted it. Then the second thing, continue antihypertensive treatment if required. Offer a review of antihypertensive treatment 2 weeks after birth with her GP or with her specialist, because she's chronic hypertension. Definitely she would have been following with her GP or specialist. So after 2 weeks, she will be reviewed by her GP or specialist. And if women has taken methyl dopa to treat chronic hypertension during pregnancy, stop within 2 days after birth and change to an alternative antihypertensive treatment. Okay, during pregnancy, we saw our angiotensin receptor blockers and angiotensin converting enzymes to be stopped within 2 days. Postnatal, aldomet, methyl dopa to be stopped within 2 days. Okay, then offer women with chronic hypertension a medical review 6 to 8 weeks after birth with her GP or specialist. So quickly I will revise. Patient delivered, blood pressure monitoring first 2 days daily, at least once between 3 and 5 days, and as clinically indicated if her antihypertensive medication was changed. After that, her review will be after 2 weeks with her GP and specialist, GP or specialist, and at 6 to 8 weeks with her GP and specialist. Then again the blood pressure aim is what? To keep blood pressure lower than 140/90 if on methyl dopa, to stop it within 2 days. Now, we reach to the second step, which is gestational hypertension, assessment and treatment of gestational hypertension. Clear so far?
Yes, doctor, it is clear.
Okay.
I have one question.
Yeah.
You said that if patient is high risk, then she should start taking Lopin from 12 weeks till delivery. Is it?
What is that? Aspirin.
Aspirin.
Yeah.
You said. So what are high risk points? What makes a patient high risk? What are mild risk factors? What are moderate risk factors? And what are major risk factors? So we can quantify it if she's.
Yeah, we have that. Can I go back to that slide? We have that slide, the high risk factors and moderate factors. Here. Sorry. High risk factors. Those who are already in previous pregnancy with hypertensive diseases. Those with chronic kidney disease. Those with autoimmune disease like SLE and antiphospholipid syndrome. Those who are already with chronic hypertension. And those with type 1 and 2 diabetes.
Okay, I got it.
This is high risk.
Yes.
High risk and moderate risk factors are here. High risk, only one will be enough to start aspirin, 75 to 150 milligram, but moderate, we need more than one risk factor. So in moderate, as we said, like if the woman, she's 40 years or older, if her body mass index is more than 35, in her family, any history in first degree relative of preeclampsia, then related to pregnancy, if that is her first pregnancy, if pregnancy intervals more than 10 years, and if it is a multifetal pregnancy. These are moderate risk factors. Treatment of gestation. Now in women with gestational hypertension, as we discussed earlier, it is more than 20 weeks, second half of pregnancy. Full assessment should be carried out in a secondary care setting. So wherever any hypertension is coming, patient is going to secondary care by a healthcare professional who is trained in the management of hypertensive disorders of pregnancy. Now, in women with gestational hypertension, take account of following these factors that require additional assessment. Means whenever we found any hypertension, we do the detailed assessment, but where to put the more concentration? Either this is her first pregnancy, age is 40 or older, pregnancy interval more than 10 years, family history of preeclampsia, multifetal pregnancy, body mass index more than 35, then gestational age, what age she presented with blood pressure, and any previous pregnancy with preeclampsia or gestational hypertension, if she has any pre-existing vascular disease or if any pre-existing kidney disease. As we said, all what risk factors we told earlier, all we have collected here. So any stage we found gestational hypertension, if any of these risk factors is there, so we should go more into the detailed assessment according to available risk factors. Now, here there is one big table is there in guideline, which is for this gestational hypertension. There is some changes in this table. Previously, there was mild, moderate, and severe hypertension. The table was categorized according to that. Now, what NICE has done, they have changed it. There is only two columns now, hypertension and severe hypertension. Okay, so what is hypertension? From 140 up to 109. In between, one level was there, which was 150 and 99. They removed it. Directly they made it from 140 up to 159 and 90 to 109. This is hypertension. And severe, directly 160 and 110 and above. That is severe. So here, not much confusion, because previously there was little confusion when there were 3 degrees were there, mild, moderate, severe. So now only 2. So it is not, means a bit easy to remember it. Now these 2 tables, one is this table, gestational hypertension, and when we will reach to preeclampsia, there is another table. These 2 tables are very important because here what things are little bit confusing: when we will admit, when you will not admit the patient, how frequently you will repeat the chemistry lab test, how frequently you will monitor baby and ultrasound. These small points are different in gestational hypertension and in preeclampsia, which becomes little bit confusing. So we have to concentrate on that. Now we are seeing what? Gestational hypertension. First is hypertension, another is severe. So only I will say severe. Hypertension is hypertension. So in routine, as long as the blood pressure up to 159 and diastolic is 109, do not routinely admit to hospital. This is our gestational hypertension. So when we are admitting, if the blood pressure is severe, which is 160, 110, admit to hospital. But if blood pressure falls below 160 to 110, then manage, then the further management will be as per the first column again. So admission only when it is severe hypertension. Now medication. Medication what? Offer pharmacological treatment if BP remains above 140/90. That we saw earlier also. If it is 140/90 means we should allow offer the treatment. Then again second column same. Offer when it is 140/90. Aim for the blood pressure 135/85 in hypertension. Aim to maintain the blood pressure 135/85 in severe hypertension. Both is the same. Now, how is the blood pressure monitoring? Since in hypertension column, we did not admit them. So how will be the monitoring? It will be once or twice a week until the BP is 135/85 or less. This is the monitoring. In severe hypertension column, now the patient is admitted. Patient is in hospital. So how we will monitor? Every 15 to 30 minutes until it gets less than 160/110. Once it becomes less than 160/110, automatically the category will change and the further management as the other case, like which is hypertension. So again, quickly I will revise. We are admitting with gestational hypertension. Still, we did not reach to proteinuria. We are admitting only when it is severe. Severe is 160/110 and above. After admission, medication for both. Once the blood pressure is more than 140/90 in hypertension case, and the severe, definitely medication. In both the categories, aim of the blood pressure to keep the blood pressure 135/85 or less. That will be the aim. Monitoring is little different blood pressure monitoring because the OPD basis, we will call them once or twice a week until the BP is 135/85. And the one which is already inpatient, severe hypertension, we will monitor blood pressure every 15 to 30 minutes till the blood pressure goes less than 160/110. This we have no choice other than just mugging it up repeatedly. Make one printout, put on your refrigerator, put in front of your bed, put on the cupboard, dressing table, while walking, while getting up, sleeping, just to see it. This one plus your what is that staging in cancer and all, to by heart like that, percentages, no, right, everywhere where you see daily. Now the second step for the same gestational hypertension, dipstick proteinuria testing. Because still proteinuria did not develop, so we are testing. Testing how? For hypertension, we are doing as per they are coming. We are following them once or twice a week. So testing also will be once or twice a week. But with admitted patient daily, because patient already in hospital. What blood test we will do? Full blood count, liver function test, renal function test. In hypertension, we will do at presentation and then we will repeat it weekly. In severe case, full blood count, liver and renal function test at presentation and then weekly. So lab monitoring is same in both the cases. Okay. After that, as our new amendment, placental growth factor based testing. What is the recommendation? Carry out placental growth factor based testing on one occasion in accordance with NICE guidance that we have seen earlier. If there is suspicion of preeclampsia, if we are feeling that no, this might land up with preeclampsia, so to do this placental growth factor in both the cases, severe and this one as well, moderate hypertension as well. Then the third thing is fetal assessment. What is fetal assessment? In hypertension column, offer fetal heart auscultation at every antenatal appointment. How we are following them? Once or twice a week according to blood pressure. So that time auscultation. Then carry out ultrasound assessment of fetus at diagnosis, and if normal, repeat every 2 to 4 weeks if clinically indicated. This is very tricky and a good point here. Then carry out CTG only if clinically, means not routine recommendation of CTG. Ultrasound at presentation, if it comes normal, no IUG or nothing, no oligohydramnios, growth is fine, umbilical artery Doppler is normal, in that case, to be repeated 2 to 4 weeks if it is clinically indicated. And auscultation of fetal heart at each clinical visit, which so far we are following 1 to 2 times per week. This is for hypertension. Now severe hypertension, what they are telling, offer fetal heart auscultation at every antenatal appointment, same like the first one. Carry out ultrasound assessment of the fetus at diagnosis, and if normal, repeat every 2 weeks if severe hypertension persists. This is change from the first column. CTG at diagnosis and then only if clinical indicated. So ultrasound, there is different recommendation in both the things. OPD follow-up, there is little different recommendation, and blood pressure monitoring, there is little difference in the recommendation. These points has to be by heart. Okay, I will continue.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we monitored them already. Now we reach to timing of birth. Again, it is the same like earlier. Do not offer planned early birth. This is still we are on gestational hypertension. No proteinuria yet. Do not offer planned early birth before 37 weeks to women with gestational hypertension whose blood pressure is lower than 160/110 unless there are other medical indications. This is the same what we have seen in chronic hypertension. For women with gestational hypertension whose blood pressure is lower than 160/110, after 37 weeks, timing of birth and maternal and fetal indications for birth should be agreed between women and senior obstetrician. This we have seen earlier again. And if planned birth is necessary, course of antenatal corticosteroids and magnesium sulfate as per the NICE guideline. That is another guideline. Okay. Now we delivered already. Now postnatal investigations and things. Here we will see what is the difference compared to chronic hypertension. If women with gestational hypertension measure blood pressure daily for 2 days after birth, same in chronic, at least once between day 3 and day 5 after birth, same in chronic. Then as clinically indicated if antihypertensive treatment is changed after birth. Till this point is safe. In women with gestational hypertension who have given birth, continue antihypertensive treatment if required according to the blood pressure. Advise women that the duration of their postnatal antihypertensive treatment will usually be similar to the duration of their antenatal treatment what they were taking. Then reduce antihypertensive treatment if their blood pressure falls below 130/80. Okay. In chronic hypertension, we did not see this point. This point is here. To reduce the antihypertensive treatment if blood pressure falls between 130 AP. Here they did not write, till now we did not see anything to see GP or to see the specialist. Till now we didn't see, which we have seen in chronic hypertension, that they will have 2 weeks follow-up with the GP or specialist. Then they will have 6 to 8 weeks follow-up with the GP or specialist. Here till now we did not see. Let us see next slide. If women has taken methyl dopa to treat gestational hypertension, stopped within 2 days, that we know already. For women with gestational hypertension who did not take antihypertensive treatment and have given birth, start antihypertensive treatment if their pressure is 150/100 or higher, means she was not needing any treatment. Now, if you remember, there was the same point there in chronic hypertension also, but the blood pressure reading was different there. Blood pressure reading was different. Here it is 150/100, there it was different. So these small points which we have to remember. Okay? Then,
Dr. Fahmida?
yes, my dear.
There was, I think so, instead of 150/100, there was 140/90.
I love you. Yes. These small tricky points when it comes in exam with that one page EMQ, really our head starts spinning there and we forget, like suddenly we become, oh, it was in chronic or it was in gestational. So these small points to make it like तावीज़ हो तो लटका के रखो तो बस वो दिखता रहे ना, हर जगह पे दिखता रहे, कुछ भी like that.
Yes.
है ना? अच्छा, अभी now new point what is coming here, it is to write a care plan. In chronic hypertension, since the patient is already known hypertensive, she was already having follow-up with her specialist, with her GP, but here the patient was not known hypertensive. She was not having follow-up with her blood pressure specialist. So here we are writing care plan. Care plan for whom? For community care, because patient will go back to community. So who are going back there, community, when we are transferring them, what we will write in our care plan, what we will write. First of all, who will provide follow-up care, including medical review if needed. If suddenly patient condition changes, if her blood pressure changes, if medicine need to restart, if need to stop, who will follow up? Who will decide this? What will be frequency of her blood pressure monitoring? What will be the threshold to reduce or to stop her treatment? And what will be the indications for referral to primary care for blood pressure review? All this care plan should be written. This is starting from gestational hypertension. We did not do that in chronic hypertension. Now, for women who have had gestational hypertension and who remain on antihypertensive treatment, a medical review with the GP or specialist 2 weeks after transfer to community care. So this is the point here, amendment what? In chronic hypertension, routinely we are doing this. But in gestational hypertension, those who are already, we are continuing their treatment even after the delivery also. For them, 2 weeks after the delivery, they will go back to specialist or GP. And to all women who have had gestational hypertension, a medical review with their GP or specialist 6 to 8 weeks after the birth. Okay, so this is our gestational hypertension. Now we reach to preeclampsia. I will continue.
Yes, Dr. Fahmida, can you summarize the main differences in blood pressure in between these chronic hypertension and in gestational hypertension?
Yeah.
And then again compare it in postnatal period.
Yeah.
Just a quick review.
Sure. In chronic hypertension, what they did, they first told like 140/90 was the baseline in chronic hypertension, even to start also the treatment if the patient is not on any hypertensive treatment. That was the baseline to start the treatment. Here, after the delivery also, the aim to keep the blood pressure is 140/90. That was in chronic hypertension. Now, in gestational hypertension, again, the starting point is the same, 140/90 only. Previously, in gestational hypertension, the categorization of blood pressure was mild, moderate, severe. Now they removed it. Just they made it like hypertension and severe hypertension. So our hypertension goes from 140 to 159. This is antenatal. Diastolic will be 90 to 109, and 160 by 110 and above is severe. So difference in that 2 column again, monitoring what we have seen here. Like quickly I will say this chart again, that unless it is severe hypertension, we will not admit the patient. Treatment In hypertension, once it is 140/90, definitely we are offering the treatment. Same we will continue to severe. Both the cases, aim of blood pressure will be 135/85. Hypertension, it will be once or twice follow-up in clinic until the blood pressure 135/85 or less. In inpatient admission, blood pressure monitoring will be every 15 to 30 minutes. The blood pressure comes down to 160/110. Then about the blood test in both the cases we will do at presentation, then weekly. Placental growth factor we will do. Fetal heart monitoring for OPD basis, what we are monitoring hypertension cases there. Every visit, which will be once or twice a week, as we said. Ultrasound monitoring we will do at presentation. Then we will repeat 2 to 4 weeks if it is clinically indicated, and no role of CTG unless it is clinically indicated. But in severe cases, we will offer fetal heart auscultation at every antenatal appointment. Then ultrasound we will carry out at presentation. If it is normal, we will repeat every 2 weeks if severe hypertension persists. Now, birth as it is same, what is there in chronic hypertension, it should not be planned birth unless the blood pressure is more than 160/110 and above. As long as it is lower than that, it should not be before 37 weeks. After 37 weeks, with senior obstetrician involvement, if before 37 weeks they are planning the birth with corticosteroid course and magnesium sulfate as per the NICE guideline. Now, when we will go to postnatal, blood pressure monitoring, say initial daily for first 2 days, once between day 3 and day 5. Then, if it is indicated according to change in medication, and aim to keep the blood pressure, there we read it is 140/90. Here, to start the antihypertensive, suppose if some patient they were not on any treatment, just with the diet and lifestyle they were managing, in that case, if the blood pressure becomes 150/100 or higher, we have to start the medication. Antenatally 140/90, postnatally 150/100. This is the difference there and here in chronic and in gestational hypertension.
Okay, thank you very much.
What to do in
Excuse me, ma'am. Hello. Ma'am, target BP in chronic hypertension postnatally was 140/90. And what is target BP in gestational hypertension postnatally?
Sorry, dear. I think she was asking what is the postnatal.
I was talking about target BP in postnatally in gestational hypertension.
149 in gestation, 130/80. 130/80. If it actually 135/85, but if it falls below 130/80, that time we have to reduce and at some stage to stop antihypertensive. That is in another thing. This is little confusing, but not to confuse ourselves. We are talking in one case, patient is already on antihypertensive. And what is the target blood pressure? That is one case, what we talk now. Another case, patient was not on any antihypertensive and to start, when to start, that is postnatal. So that target is 150/100 and above. Okay, we have two scenarios. One scenario where the gestational hypertension and patient is already on antihypertensive, and we have target blood pressure to keep in gestational hypertension 135/85. Once it goes to 130/80 and down, to reduce the antihypertensive. That is the patient with gestational hypertension who is on antihypertensive. We have another category where the patient did not needed any antihypertensive. They did not take any antihypertensive. They delivered. But if the blood pressure becomes 150/100 and above, that time we are supposed to start antihypertensive treatment for them. This is another category of gestational hypertension.
Okay, got it.
Okay. Now, preeclampsia. So, assessment of preeclampsia by a healthcare professional trained. Everywhere, healthcare professional who is trained in the management of hypertensive disorders of pregnancy. This should be by heart for us now, since continuously we are ready. So what to be done? Carry out a full clinical assessment at each antenatal appointment for women with preeclampsia and offer admission to hospital for surveillance and any intervention needed if there are concerns for well-being of women or baby. Means we diagnose already preeclampsia. So it will come now how the appointments will be. In that case, every time to have detailed clinical assessment and if any change in condition, maternal or fetal, when to offer admission, how to do the surveillance, when to do intervention, and what concerns to look for. Now, what are the concerns? Sustained systolic blood pressure of 160 millimeter mercury or higher, any maternal biochemical or hematological investigation that cause concern. For example, now here we went into more details. Till now we did not see all these biochemical things and all. Now we came to this detail. What is this detail? New or a persistent rise in creatinine 90 micromole per liter or more, and 1 milligram per 100 ml or more. Better to remember this 90 micromole because this is the value which comes in exam. Then rise in alanine transaminase over 70 international units per liter or twice upper limit of normal, double than upper limit of normal range. Third thing is fall in platelet count, which is under 150,000 per microliter. Okay, these are biochemical parameters. Sustained concern. What are the concerns? Sustained systolic blood pressure of 160 millimeter of mercury or more with biochemical and hematological changes. What is that? Creatinine 90 persistent high 90 micromole per liter or more. 90 micromole per liter or more means 90 is included. It is included in value. Then alanine transaminase over 70 or double the normal limit and lower in the platelet count, lower than what? Lower than 150,000 per microliter. These are the biochemical parameters. Now, what are the signs? Signs of impending eclampsia that we will see further. Signs of impending pulmonary edema like difficulty in breathing, shortness of breath, lower saturation. Other signs of severe preeclampsia like severe headache, epigastric pain, and vomiting, scotoma, all these things. Suspected fetal compromise or any other clinical sign that cause concern. That we will see now what is our preeclampsia. Now, consider either full Peyer's or PrEP as validated risk prediction model. This is the amendment, 2019 amendment, to help guide decision about the most appropriate place of care, such as the need of in utero transfer and threshold for intervention. These are models to predict what is the severity of developing preeclampsia in 48 hours, in 48 to 72 hours, in next 1 week or 2 weeks, something like that. These are what is that? In their website, these two things are there. We will see the details. First, full Peyer's intended to use at any time. It can be used anytime up to 37 weeks, but PrEP-S is intended for use only up to 34 weeks. This two, if I think I have put somewhere in the next slides, it is there. What is there? They consider like gestational age. If the patient is, both are two are different things, different details are there. It is there in somewhere in some slide. If not there, I will put in next slide, next presentation. So there is gestational age, if the patient is on any antihypertensive, if there is shortness of breathing, what is saturation, and what is alanine transaminase. That is one thing. Another model, this is full Peyer's model. What does it include? All the details, gestational age in week, in days, plus patient on antihypertensive, any magnesium sulfate, saturation, and these two models, they make it technically easy. It is in fact a guide, a help to clinician to predict if this patient is going to develop preeclampsia or to develop severe morbidity or mortality. There is percentage, if it is 30% and above, means it is high risk. It seems the patient is soon within 48 hours. They have time limit they have given. In 48 hours will predict. The other one is up to 2 weeks, 48 hours to 2 days and 2 weeks, like that it is given to predict, to have the morbidity and mortality with preeclampsia, because preeclampsia already we have, no? So why this is given? Because hospital to hospital, institute to institute, there is different management. Some patient will have intervention before needed. Some patient will not have on-time intervention, so they will end up with morbidity and mortality. So to make it standardized practice, they have this two electronic model which helps in guiding further management or to do intervention. Now, I have somewhere, what is the name of this tool? I will tell you. This Full form, this is full PIRS is pre-eclampsia integrated estimation of risk, and PrEP-S is prediction of risk of complication in early onset preeclampsia. These are the two things. Okay. Now again we came with this table. Management of pregnancy with preeclampsia. Degree of hypertension, again amended this one. Previously it was 3, mild, moderate, severe. Now we have only 2, like in gestational hypertension. So blood pressure from 140 to 159 and 190 to 109. Severe is 160 by 110 and more. So if we now we have to compare, go along with our gestational so that it will be easy to remember. In gestational, in hypertension column, there was no admission. Only in severe column, there was admission. Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Here, in both the cases, there is admission. But what is the change? Admit if any clinical concerns for the well-being of women or baby, or if high risk of adverse event suggested by full PIRS or PrEP-S risk prediction model. Okay, severe is severe, then definitely we will admit the patient, but in hypertension column, we will admit if there is any clinical concern or if high risk to have adverse event, which is suggested by what? Which is suggested by these two models, that is full PIRS and PrEP-S. This can be, because you see, this is amended guideline, new guidelines, so high possibility is there to come question on these columns, especially on these points. Whenever there is any amendment, they more concentrate on those points. As we read the placental growth factor, the details of it, you know, like as I said, sorry, to go back again, placental growth factor, the value is in picogram, less than 12 to 100, more than 100. It is not there in the main guideline, but it is given somewhere else. Again, it is there in percentile as well. If it is less than 5th percentile, it is the high predictor of this thing, preeclampsia, no, this placental growth factor. So these are the things, when any new amendment is there, we have to concentrate more on that guideline, because high possibility the questions will come from those points. So just to concentrate on this point, preeclampsia, there is hypertension, there is severe hypertension. Severe hypertension, definitely for admission, but if only hypertension, it is not severe. In that case, if there is any clinical concern or if patient is high risk. High risk, how we know high risk? We know the high risk by either full PIRS or PrEP-S prediction model. Sorry. Now, antihypertensive. Antihypertensive we will offer in both the cases, same as gestational hypertension. Here 140/90 and above, and there already it is severe. Now, aim to keep the blood pressure 135 or 85, same. Here also same, in gestational hypertension also same. Measurement, here now there is change in blood pressure measurement. In gestational hypertension column, we were not admitting the patient. We were calling the patient 1 to 2 per week, and that time we were measuring blood pressure. Here, at least every 48 hours and more frequently if women is admitted to hospital. Okay. If admitted, we know the second column, but if the women is not admitted, it is every 48 hours we should check the blood pressure. In gestational hypertension, first column is 1 to 2 per week. Here, every 48 hours. Second column now, it is the same, what was there, every 15 to 30 minutes until it goes less than 160/110. Then at least 4 times daily when she is inpatient. So this is again change than gestational hypertension. What we did, again I will repeat, in gestational hypertension, first column we did not admitted the patient. Severe hypertension, we admitted the patient. We monitored blood pressure every 15 to 30 minutes till it went down to 160/110. Once it went down to 160/110 means the patient was considered same like in the first column. But here that is not the case. Here in hypertension column, we are monitoring blood pressure every 48 hours, and when the patient is inpatient, we are monitoring blood pressure every 15 to 30 minutes till it goes less than 160/110, and then at least 4 times per day, which becomes, I believe, every 6 hours. This is depending on clinical circumstances. This is the difference in gestational and preeclampsia. Now dipstick. Dipstick, how we don't know the preeclampsia? Because already we did the dipstick and already it is done that yes, preeclampsia. Now only repeat if clinically indicated. For example, if new symptoms and signs develop, or if there is uncertainty over the diagnosis, then only to be repeated. Again, the same thing in this column, only repeat if clinically indicated, or if new signs develops, or if there is uncertainty. What we read initially, if there is uncertainty, how to repeat it. Then what blood test? In first column, we are doing full blood count, liver function and renal function twice a week. Here we are measuring full blood count, liver function, renal function 3 times per week. Okay, again, this is change, then gestational hypertension. Okay, am I clear so far?
Yes. Yes, madam.
Sorry, I can understand. This is in one go, not going to implant in our brain. It needs and needs and needs more and more revision. And believe me, more you discuss, more you remember. If I used to sit and read the whole guideline, I don't know how many times, in the end, I will find myself standing with all hypertension as if on my head. But once you discuss one time, you will remember that point. So find someone like the one who is preparing for exam, because that person only can discuss with you, because that person like that. Okay, so discuss and discuss, revise, and med home is there at every step to help you guys. Now we came to the last point, which is fetal assessment. Fetal assessment was offer fetal heart auscultation in every antenatal appointment, which we are doing in preeclampsia every 48 hours in hypertension column. Then carry out ultrasound assessment of the fetus at diagnosis, and if normal, every 2 weeks. This is change here, which was not there in gestational hypertension. And carry out CTG at diagnosis and then only clinically indicated. This is again change here, which was not there in gestational hypertension. Okay, now we will go to the severe column. What is that? Offer fetal heart auscultation at every antenatal appointment. Carry out ultrasound once at the diagnosis. If normal, repeat every 2 weeks. CTG at diagnosis and then only if clinically indicated. So these are different points than gestational hypertension. Gestational hypertension, we monitored blood pressure. We monitored ultrasound only at presentation in first column and only if clinically indicated. But here every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. Here we are doing CTG, there we did not do any CTG. Okay. At diagnosis here we are doing, there we did not do. So these are the different points there and here. Put all these charts, 3, chronic hypertension, gestational and PET. Print out these charts and put it in front of your eyes. Believe me, if you see few days later on, automatically if someone will wake you up from the sleep and tell you, this is the question, patient with chronic hypertension, and now she has presented to the clinic with a specialist, what is your monitoring for her baby? Automatically you will say the answer. So make it like this for yourself, okay? Now we come to the treatment part. Treatment part we know already from the beginning till end. Everywhere, labetalol is the first line, nifedipine is the second line, methyl dopa is the third line. So offer labetalol to treat hypertension in pregnant women with preeclampsia. Offer nifedipine for women who labetalol is not suitable, and methyl dopa if labetalol and nifedipine both are not suitable. Base the choice on what? Either if she is already on any treatment, then what are the side effects profile, any risk including any fetal effect, and women's preference, what she wants. Okay. Now, timing of birth in preeclampsia. Record maternal and fetal threshold for planned early birth before 37 weeks in women with preeclampsia. This is very important point. The birth plan should have been already documented. Threshold for considering planned early birth could include, but are not limited to what? To what? Known features of severe preeclampsia, inability to control the blood pressure despite using 3 or more classes of antihypertensives in appropriate doses. The doses detailed we will see later on. There are doses and all. In this lecture I did not put that slide, but there is for Aldomet, for labetalol, and for this one what maximum dose per day can be taken. Then maternal pulse oximetry is going less than 90%. When it goes less than 90%, what does it indicating? Anyone?
Pulmonary edema.
Thank you. Then any progressive deterioration in liver function, renal function, any hemolysis or platelet count is going down, or any ongoing neurological features. What is our neurological feature? Our breath reflexes and all, and severe intractable headache. What is the most morbidity of this? What is the highest mortality? What is the complication of preeclampsia, which is giving the highest mortality?
Help.
Anything else? Mortality.
Intracranial hemorrhage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Intracranial hemorrhage. 50% mortality with intracranial hemorrhage. So now, repeated any visual symptoms or already eclampsia, any placental abruption, then these are what? To decide the timing of birth. If we are planning early delivery, what will be our threshold? These points are for this threshold to decide delivery before 37 weeks. Any features of severe preeclampsia, then blood pressure, uncontrolled blood pressure, suspected pulmonary edema, deteriorating LFTs, renal function, platelet is going down, neurological symptoms are breath reflexes and all, intractable headache, or any already eclampsia. Abruption means definitely this is severe preeclampsia, already baby abruption, placenta abrupted, reverse and diastolic flow in umbilical artery Doppler, or any non-reassuring CTG, or already stillbirth. All these are factors where delivery will be planned before 37 weeks. Now again, involve senior everywhere. This funny point you will see in part 3 more, inshallah. Soon you people will see this everywhere. Senior has to be there. Then what candidate started doing, involving senior everywhere were not needed also. Then the answer came that then what you are supposed to do where everywhere you will involve senior. So like that. Okay. Now involve senior obstetrician, any decision on timing of birth for women with preeclampsia. Discuss with anesthetic. Here now we are involving new people as well. What is that anesthetic team? If birth is planned in women with preeclampsia, neonatal team, if birth is planned due to anticipated neonatal complication, and offer intravenous magnesium sulfate and course of antenatal steroid if indicated. This is according to if the birth is preterm and according to NICE guideline, preterm guideline. That guideline also hopefully we will manage to see somewhere in future. Now we came to the timing of birth. How to decide the timing of birth? So we have 3 categories. We have one category is 37 weeks onwards plus. Let us come from up to down. 37 weeks onwards, 34 to 36 plus 6, and before 34 weeks. Now let us take the last point first. 37 weeks onwards. What we have seen in our chronic hypertension and in our gestational hypertension, that as long as blood pressure less than 160/110, with or without medication, not to deliver, and no other clinical concern, not to deliver less than 37 weeks. And once we cross 37 weeks above, what to do? To involve senior, the discussion between senior and women. That was our gestational hypertension, that was our chronic hypertension. But here we are dealing with PET, which is multi-system disorder, which is catastrophe. So there, once we are 37 weeks onwards, there is no further waiting period. Initiate birth within 24 to 48 hours. Okay, this is very important point here. PET, either it is mild, moderate, severe, we don't have anything here. We are supposed to deliver the patient. That is 37 weeks onwards. Now, 34 to 36 plus 6. Here what? Continued surveillance unless what? There are indications for planned early birth. What indications we saw in our previous slide? So surveillance. Now what surveillance? When considering the option of planned early birth, take into account women's and babies' condition, risk factors such as any maternal comorbidities, any multiple pregnancy, and availability of neonatal unit bed. Consider a course of antenatal steroid in line with NICE guideline and on preterm labor and birth. Here they mention only steroid. Why they did not mention Maxel? Here at this particular gestation, they did not mention magnesium sulfate point. Otherwise, wherever they are telling less than 37 weeks preterm delivery, when you are considering 2 points. One is corticosteroid and magnesium sulfate as per NICE preterm guideline. Here 36 plus 6, they did not mention magnesium because according to that NICE guideline, magnesium is it should be yes, up to less than 34 weeks. Okay, now we are coming to our first point, which is before 34 weeks. Continue surveillance unless there are indication Indication already we know, we have seen the first column. For plan early birth, offer intravenous, answer is here only. Offer intravenous magnesium and a course of antenatal corticosteroid in line with NICE preterm guideline. So the very important point in preeclampsia, 37 weeks onwards, no further waiting to plan birth, to initiate birth within 24 to 48 hours. That is the most important point here. Okay. We delivered already. We reached to postnatal investigations, monitoring and treatment, including after discharge from the critical care. So what is the monitoring here? Here monitoring, again the same, at least, not the same. What was there in chronic and in gestational hypertension? At least daily for initial 2 days. That was our thing. Here, at least 4 times a day while women is inpatient. Then at least once between day 3 and 5 after birth, and on alternate day until normal if blood pressure was abnormal on day 3 to 5. Okay, totally change wordings here. In gestational, in chronic, we saw at least daily for initial 2 days, at least once between day 3 and day 5. Then when it will be clinically indicated according to change in medication, and review will be at 2 weeks and at 6 to 8 weeks with the GP or specialist. That was the thing. But here the timings is daily, different, monitoring is different. Initially at least 4 times a day while the woman is inpatient. Inpatient, she is 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, we don't know. That is inpatient 4 times per day. Then at least once between day 3 and day 5, and if we find abnormal here, then it will be every alternate day until it will become normal. Okay. Now, in women with preeclampsia who did not take antihypertensive and have given birth, start antihypertensive if the blood pressure is 150 over 100. This is the same as in gestational hypertension. Okay. Then what to here, the counseling is very important. Counseling about what? About any symptoms of severe headache, any epigastric pain, or any untoward symptom she has to report. So at discharge, women will be counseled about these points. Now in women with preeclampsia who took antihypertensive treatment and have given birth, measure the blood pressure at least 4 times a day. This is the same thing. Okay, 2 weeks. Now every 1 to 2 days for up to 2 weeks after transfer to community care until the woman is off the treatment and has no hypertension. For women with preeclampsia who have taken antihypertensive treatment and have given the birth, continue antihypertensive treatment, same in gestational hypertension. Consider reducing antihypertensive treatment if their blood pressure falls below 140/90 and reduce the treatment if blood pressure falls below 130/80. Okay. Again here, these values are there. Consider, there is do. Consider when it is 140/90, below 140/90, and reduce 130 when it is below 130/80. Okay, dear? So again, the monitoring, I will go, sorry, to first slide again. 4 times a day as long as she is in the hospital, at least once between day 3 and day 5, alternate day until the blood pressure becomes normal if it was noted abnormal on day 3 and between day 3 and day 5, if we had found that abnormal. If the patient was not already on antihypertensive, so when to start if the blood pressure becomes 150/100 or above. Then here 4 times a day, this is the same point, every 1 to 2 days up to where, up to blood pressure normal, and up to 2 weeks after we will transfer her to community care. Until when? Until she becomes off the treatment or if she has no hypertension. Okay. Then we will consider reducing the treatment when it goes below 140/90. We will reduce antihypertensive treatment when it will go below, falls below 130/80. Okay. Then again the same point, methyl dopa, we know already, we have seen earlier, to stop within 2 days if she was on it. Now offer transfer to community care if the following. Okay, now when to be transferred to community care, because we will write plan and we will send her, but when to be done? If there are no symptoms of preeclampsia, blood pressure with or without treatment is 150/100 or less, and blood test results are stable or improving. All the biochemical parameters are already stable, not deteriorating more, or they are improving. Blood pressure with or without treatment, 150, 100 or less. And there are no symptoms of preeclampsia. That time we will write the care plan and we will refer them to community care. What care plan to be written? Who will provide follow-up care, including who will do the medical review, what will be the frequency of monitoring, what will be the threshold of reducing or stopping the treatment, what threshold we saw. If it is 140, 90 and down, it is 130, 80 and down. We saw where to consider, where to reduce the treatment. And self-monitoring of the symptoms, what we have seen earlier, severe headache, blurring of vision, severe epigastric pain, vomiting, all these are symptoms to be counseled. Now, for women who have had preeclampsia and who remain on antihypertensive treatment, a medical review with the GP specialist 2 weeks after transfer to community care, and again medical review with the GP specialist 6 to 8 weeks after the birth. So this review is there everywhere. Okay. Now, what is the hematological monitoring? Because we are doing blood pressure monitoring, we are doing symptomatic monitoring. Here in preeclampsia, we are doing hematological monitoring as well postnatally. Antenatally we did, postnatally also we are doing. What is that? In women who have preeclampsia with mild or moderate hypertension, or after a step down from critical care, there is this critical care chart also is there. So what to do now? Measure platelet count, transaminases and serum creatinine 48 to 72 hours after birth, or if she was stepped down from critical care. In that case, 48 to 72 hours we will measure. Measure what? Platelet count, transaminases and creatinine. Do not repeat platelet count, transaminases or serum creatinine if results are normal. When we did here at 48 to 72 hours, results came normal. No need to repeat again. If biochemical and hematological indices are outside the reference range in women with preeclampsia who have given birth, repeat platelet count, transaminase and creatinine as clinically indicated until it returns to normal. Here they didn't specify either weekly, either every 48 hours or 48 to 72 hours. They said as clinically indicated until it returns to normal. In women with preeclampsia who have given birth, carry out a urinary reagent strip. This is again new point here, to do our again dipstick test at 6 to 8 weeks after birth. This is not there in gestational, this is not there in chronic because there is no protein there. Here when there is protein, so this is one extra test. Then offer women who had preeclampsia and still have proteinuria 1+ or more at 6 to 8 weeks after birth, further review with their GP or specialist at 3 months after the birth to assess kidney function. This is extra point here. Okay. So we are doing symptomatic monitoring, we are doing blood pressure monitoring, we are doing biochemical monitoring. Biochemical monitoring got 3 factors we are monitoring, that is platelet, creatinine, transaminases. When we monitored from the step down from a critical care or with mild or moderate hypertension. When we monitored 48 to 72 hours after birth. And if that comes normal, we are not further monitoring. If it comes abnormal, still deranged, that time we are monitoring as clinically indicated until when? Until it returns to normal. Okay. Then they are having their review with GP or specialist at 2 weeks, at 6 to 8 weeks. But at 6 to 8 weeks, again, we are doing urinary reagent strip test. If it comes 1+ or more, that time the patient will have follow-up with GP or specialist at 3 months after birth to assess what? To assess kidney function. Now, fetal monitoring in chronic hypertension. This is
sorry, ma'am. Ma'am, uric acid का role बता दें इसमें.
Actually, nowadays uric acid doesn't have any specific role in monitoring preeclampsia or eclampsia. It doesn't have. Still we do. Even in our hospital we do it, but it doesn't have any significant role.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Now, this fetal monitoring, from where it came? In chronic hypertension. Now separate fetal monitoring in each tension to give us more tension. Extra slide. What is there in chronic hypertension? In women with chronic hypertension.
Or tension.
Yeah, to increase our tension only, extra tension is there. What is there? Actually, if you read this IUGR guideline and all, the GTG guideline, there is certain criteria where you will monitor fetal monitoring from 28 weeks, where you will monitor from 26 weeks. So there is one criteria, this chronic hypertension also, fetal growth monitoring to be done. To be done for what? For amniotic fluid volume, for growth, and for umbilical artery Doppler velocimetry. So that is in chronic hypertension, automatically it is at 28 weeks, 32 and 36 weeks. From 28 weeks, monthly fetal monitoring is automatically there, but if we read that GTG for IUGR. Okay. Now, in women with chronic what fetal monitoring we do? We do ultrasound, we do CTG. In ultrasound, what we see three factors: fetal growth, amniotic fluid volume, and umbilical artery Doppler velocimetry. In that case, the one who is already known chronic hypertension, there you will monitor fetal growth from 28 weeks monthly, 28, 32, 36. CTG only if clinically indicated. This is our chronic hypertension. Now, gestational hypertension. In women with gestational hypertension, carry out ultrasound for fetal growth and volume and umbilical artery Doppler at diagnosis, and if normal, repeat 2 to 4 weeks if clinically indicated. Okay. In chronic hypertension, automatically we are doing gestational hypertension only at the diagnosis, and after that 2 to 4 weeks if clinically indicated. In women with gestational hypertension, only carry out CTG. They are not routinely recommending CTG in chronic and in gestational. Now, in preeclampsia and severe gestational hypertension, what is the monitoring? Carry out CTG at diagnosis of preeclampsia or severe gestational hypertension. If conservative management of preeclampsia or severe gestational hypertension is planned, carry out all the following tests at diagnosis. What is that? Ultrasound for fetal growth, amniotic fluid, umbilical artery Doppler. If the results of all fetal monitoring are normal in women with preeclampsia or severe gestational hypertension, do not routinely repeat CTG unless clinically indicated. Okay, we are doing a diagnosis CTG. After that, if ultrasound is normal, CTG is not routinely recommended. Then here, if women with preeclampsia or severe hypertension, repeat CTG if any of the following. Okay, CTG when to be? We are doing only at diagnosis. This is, we are talking about preeclampsia. Only at diagnosis. When we are supposed to repeat, if the woman reports any change in fetal movements, any vaginal bleeding or abdominal pain, any deterioration in maternal condition. In that case, we are supposed to do the CTG. Otherwise, only it is at diagnosis. In gestational hypertension, mild or moderate, or in chronic hypertension, there is no CTG at diagnosis. Only when it is clinically indicated, it is written in those two categories. Okay? Now, in women,
okay, Dr. Hinida?
Yes, my dear.
It's mean that we have to go for ultrasound and Doppler only in preeclampsia, only in chronic hypertension at intervals.
Excellent. Yes, only in chronic hypertension. Yes, very good. Just a minute. Only in chronic hypertension. That also, if we read our IUGR guideline, that will be automatically by heart for us, because that is one cause of IUGR and all, one of the risk factors. So in that case, growth monitoring is needed. But in gestational hypertension, only at diagnosis. After that, we have to repeat 2 to 4 weeks only if clinically indicated. In preeclampsia, we are doing this first ultrasound. We are doing CTG at diagnosis. After that, we did not repeat CTG unless clinically indicated. Clinical indications are what? If any change in fetal movement, any bleeding, any abdominal pain, or any deterioration in maternal condition. Now, ultrasound when to repeat in preeclampsia for fetal growth and volume and umbilical artery Doppler every 2 weeks. Here we have to do every 2 weeks with subsequent surveillance and monitoring determined by the findings. Every 2 weeks, as long as the findings are coming normal. But if findings change, what findings we are looking for? We are looking for growth, we are looking for Doppler, we are looking for amniotic fluid. So if Doppler comes high, if Doppler comes reverse, if Doppler comes absent, definitely monitoring will change. And that is our one detailed guideline is there, IUGR guideline, where all these things. How? So that's why they have written every 2 weeks. This is in PET, we are telling, or severe gestational hypertension. Ultrasound monitoring every 2 weeks with subsequent surveillance and monitoring determined by findings. Findings what? Every time if the ultrasound comes normal, still we will monitor every 2 weeks as long as we are not delivering them. Otherwise, according to ultrasound finding. Then women with preeclampsia or severe gestational hypertension, again we have to write care plan. Care plan what? Timing and nature of future fetal monitoring. If we are not delivering them, then we have to write care plan. Care plan what will come? What is the fetal monitoring? Timing and nature. Either we are doing CTG, either we are doing ultrasound. What will be the fetal indications for birth, and when the corticosteroid will be given, and neonatal team and anesthetist should be involved. Okay. Now, when do we need additional this we saw routine fetal monitoring, what we are doing CTG, when we are doing ultrasound, in chronic hypertension, in gestational hypertension, in preeclampsia, in severe gestational hypertension. 3 are little differences there in all of the 3. Now, when we do the additional monitoring, what is that? Carry out an ultrasound for fetal growth, amniotic fluid, and Doppler. Whenever we do ultrasound, we are here as long as we are talking about blood pressure or diabetes and all. For what we are doing? We are doing for growth, volume, amniotic fluid volume, and umbilical artery Doppler. These 3 things only what we see. That biophysical profile and all what we see in routinely what we do in our hospital also sometimes we do, but it is not nowhere it is there and all. Fetal growth, amniotic fluid volume, and Doppler, umbilical artery Doppler, like that. So now ultrasound for fetal growth and volume and umbilical artery Doppler is starting between 28 and 30 weeks. This is additional, other than what we read so far. Additional monitoring they have given in what circumstances to be done between 28 and 30 weeks, or at least 2 weeks before previous gestational age of onset, if earlier than 28 weeks, and repeat 4 weeks later in women with previous. Okay, there are certain criteria where we are supposed to do additional fetal monitoring. What is that criteria? If there is previous history of severe preeclampsia, if there was preeclampsia where the birth was needed to be done before 34 weeks, if there was preeclampsia, the baby was born with percentile less than 10. If there was preeclampsia which was complicated with abruption, or there was intrauterine death. In all these risk factors in previous pregnancy, what risk factors in previous pregnancy? First of all, if there was any preeclampsia. Okay, there was preeclampsia which necessitated delivery before 34 weeks. Okay, there was preeclampsia which caused baby to become IUGR. IUGR what? Percentile less than 10. Okay, there was preeclampsia or chronic hypertension or gestation, anything which caused either abruption or intrauterine fetal death. In all this previous history, there will be additional fetal monitoring. What is that additional fetal monitoring? To do ultrasound between 28 to 30 weeks or 2 weeks before the gestational age in previous pregnancy, whatever catastrophe has happened. And it should be repeated again 4 weeks later. So this 2 ultrasound has to be done in the history of this previous, whoever has this previous history. This is additional than what we read so far. Okay. Again, in women who need additional fetal monitoring, what we read just now, CTG again only is clinically indicated. Means in these cases we are not doing routinely CTG, but we are doing extra ultrasound for them. Whether now they are either eclampsia, not eclampsia, pre-eclampsia, gestational, anything. Now nothing, but previous history was there. What was the history? Either there was PET, either the PET necessitated birth before 34 weeks, either there was IUGR, there was intrauterine fetal death, and there was placental abruption. In these cases, we are doing ultrasound either between 28 to 30 weeks or 2 weeks before the gestational age, what the previous gestational age, when this catastrophe has happened. And again, we are repeating this ultrasound after 4 weeks. Okay, now intrapartum care. Baba, what is the time now?
It is
5:57. Okay, I think after 10 minutes, Maghrib Adhan will call. Okay, now intrapartum care. Now patient intrapartum care blood pressure. During labor, measure blood pressure hourly in women with hypertension every 15 to 30 minutes until the blood pressure is less than 160/110 in women with severe hypertension. Okay, they have written now intrapartum care, how the monitoring of blood pressure, monitoring of hematological monitoring, and care during epidural. So blood pressure hourly as long as it is hypertension. Once it becomes severe, severe is what? 160/110 and above. There the monitoring is 15 to 30 minutes. That we read already in our that 2 chart. Then antenatal hypertension, whatever antihypertensives are there, that will be continued during labor also. Then biochemical monitoring, determine the need for hematological and biochemical tests during labor in women with hypertension using the same criteria as in the antenatal period, what we have read already. Then an epidural, do not preload women who have severe preeclampsia with intravenous fluids before establishing low dose epidural or combined spinal epidurals, except there is no preload in any case in hypertension except where we are starting hydralazine. That will come somewhere in our further slides. It will come. Before giving hydralazine, 500 ml crystalloid solution has to be given to the patient because it may hydralazine can cause, it is a potential drug to cause sudden hypotension. So 500 ml crystalloid solution should be infused to the patient. Any medication or before epidural or any combined spinal epidural, no recommendation to preload the fluid. Okay. Now, second stage of labor, it is simple. As long as blood pressure is controlled, do not routinely limit the duration of second stage. Do not cut short. Do not routinely limit. Now, where it is severe hypertension, it is not responding to the initial treatment. There, either operative delivery or assisted birth in second stage of labor, as per the stage, in what stage the patient. Then critical care. If any patient was admitted to critical care, here comes our magnesium sulfate. If a woman in a critical care setting who has severe hypertension or severe preeclampsia or has previously had an eclamptic fit, magnesium sulfate to be given. Now, what is the magnesium sulfate dosage they have given? Planned. Okay. Consider giving intravenous magnesium sulfate to women with severe preeclampsia who are in a critical care setting if birth is planned within 24 hours. That is, I think, the preterm one, which automatically by default we will give. Consider need for magnesium sulfate treatment if one or more of the following features of severe preeclampsia is present. What is that? Either ongoing or recurring severe headache, visual scotoma, nausea or vomiting. Consider, so okay, if these symptoms are there, means it is the impending signs, what we say in our language, impending signs of eclampsia. That time, if one or more features are present, that time we should consider need for magnesium sulfate. When we give this same thing, oliguria, okay, consider the need for magnesium sulfate if one or more of the following are present: ongoing recurring severe headache and oliguria, severe hypertension, progressive deterioration in lab blood tests such as rising creatinine, liver transaminases or falling platelet. These three things we are monitoring everywhere. Deterioration, progress, improvement, everything monitored by these three biochemical factors, that is creatinine, platelet and our transaminases. What we saw, creatinine 90 micromole, we saw platelet less than 150,000, we saw transaminase above 70 or double than the normal value.
Dr. Fahmida?
Yes, my dear.
Here is a question.
Yes.
If woman has developed these impending features and we have given her max sulfate and she becomes stable, are we supposed to deliver her if she becomes stable after these measures?
Yes, it's there. Further in our slides, it is there. Unless it is like other ongoing biochemical deterioration, ongoing clinical symptoms deterioration, we can stabilize her according to the gestational age, what we saw in our chart. Gestational age, if it is 37 weeks, either women stabilize also 37 and above. Once it is diagnosed preeclampsia, she should deliver.
Okay, if someone has, some patient has given max sulfate,
yes,
and she becomes stable, so we are not in that, we should deliver her within 24 hours as previous guideline.
Magnesium sulfate is started when we plan for delivery of the patient as well. Patient should be delivered.
Yeah, but
definitely.
But what we will see here, what is written, if there is severe features also we are starting. We are not only for the planned delivery. That is the second point. If we are planning birth within 24 hours, there is point when definitely you are right that when we are planning birth within 24 hours, we are giving magnesium sulfate. That is one point. But if there is severe, more than one symptoms, again we are starting magnesium sulfate in that case. The delivery plan, what we saw our previous chart, if you want me to go back to it again, but it will be very back again. We will come in between to that. Then the gestational age has been given according to clinical symptoms, according to biochemical symptoms, and the gestational age. If we are the gestational age 37 weeks, whatever clinical improvement happening, not happening, biochemical deterioration happening, not happening, but there is preeclampsia, she needs the delivery. But the other gestational age, if there is improvement in the symptoms, if it is not deteriorating, we are definitely sure if it is severe, definitely there will be worsening symptoms and worsening biochemical parameters, in which case patient has to be delivered only, and irrespective of gestational age. This is now they have given this, all of us we know it, this magnesium sulfate. Use the collaborative eclampsia trial regime for administration of magnesium sulfate. Again, I would mention one more point. What we read that our full fires and prep S try this models, no, this model also, these two models, what they are recommending again and again, they are helping again to decide the delivery to minimize morbidity and mortality. Okay, with that, if we read again, actually I was not able to take it from where I read it in nice details only, where there is recommendation and research and all what they write. There is written 30% and above is indicator of very poor maternal or fetal outcome. Sorry, maternal, not fetal. They are not giving any fetal criteria, not any fetal surveillance indicator of that. So 30% above, that tells us that in future soon patient is going to develop either severe preeclampsia or eclampsia. So in that case, she needs to be delivered. So that is the guide again to decide delivery. Okay. Then our magnesium sulfate, 4 gram, as we know, 5 to 15 minutes. This timing should be remembered, memorized, because there are two things. One we are giving for preeclampsia, one we are giving for prematurity. This timing is different there. So, and it comes as a question. So here for preeclampsia, we are giving loading dose 4 gram over 5 to 15 minutes, followed by infusion 1 gram per hour, maintained for 24 hours. Okay. In any case, it will be maintained for 24 hours only, unless what? If the woman has had an eclamptic fit. In that case, the infusion should be continued for 24 hours after the last fit. Otherwise, whatever severe and all, it will be total 24 hours. Then recurrent fits should be treated with further dose of 2 to 4 grams given intravenously over 5 to 15 minutes. Do not use diazepam. Do not use phenytoin or other anticonvulsant. If someone is already at same time has read or is preparing for MRCP Ireland, there is little difference in these things, because these people are not telling to use diazepam or phenytoin, but there is phenobarbital and all, it is there. Anyhow, since we are reading MRCOG, we should concentrate here only. So do not use any diazepam, phenytoin or any other anticonvulsant or an alternative to magnesium sulfate in women with eclampsia. So what to be done? Suppose if recurrent fits, we gave first bolus, we gave second bolus, not improving. What to be done? Patient is still...
Can give diazepam.
No, not be given. It is here in front of us. Should not be given. Do not use diazepam or phenytoin or any other anticonvulsant. So what will be the next step? Patient is fitting.
Intubation, yes.
The dose of magnesium sulfate.
Magnesium will be given. There is loading.
Intubation.
Loading dose and there will be infusion. Loading dose is 4 gram. She was asking percent. We finish magnesium bolus dose. We finish 5 to 15 minutes. We finish infusion 1 gram per hour for 24 hours total, unless there was fit. Fit means that it should be continued 24 hours after the last fit. If any recurrent fits, 2 to 4 gram, another bolus can be given. Should not, we do not use diazepam, we do not use phenytoin, or we do not use any other anticonvulsant alternative to magnesium sulfate in women with eclampsia. Now, the details of antihypertensive. I'm very sorry, my dearies. Actually, Maghrib Adhan has called. So, Shall we pray and review?
Things, and then we will add these antihypertensive
Yes, it is a
drugs.
good idea
It will
because it's
Yes,
give more
please,
fun.
ma'am. Repeat all those hypertensive management and the remaining part tomorrow.
yeah, remaining what we have now, quickly I will tell you, we have antihypertensive, fluid balance, critical care, levels of critical care. Then during postnatal period and breastfeeding, this antihypertensive is there, risk of recurrence, this hypertensive disorders in future pregnancy, like that again, cardiovascular risk. Then I have put some strat questions also there. I did not put much, only few, but if we are planning to continue tomorrow, I can add more.
Oh, okay. We can continue tomorrow. We will revise these and we will take few recalls.
Sure. Yeah, recall, I have to search for recall. I have collected from Strat Talk. So Dr. Hira, if I can get some help from you for recall, I will add them.
Okay, I will share few recalls. Our Strat OG questions are enough.
Strategy
It's up
I
to
have.
you.
Strategy remaining all I will add all what there is in that.
All right, Dr. Hira, I can, sorry to interrupt, but all right, I can search for the questions, for the recall questions. I knew a few of the questions, so I'll just post them in the middle of the session tomorrow. Is it okay for everyone?
Dr. Hira, what do you say?
Okay, fine. Aksa, fine.
Good.
You're welcome for this favor. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much.
Actually, questions and all, whoever can share, the more we discuss, more it will be helpful for everyone. It will be actually, so that is a good idea only. So hopefully, let us see, we will continue tomorrow again from our antihypertensive slide. And again, most of my friends and my relatives, including my daughter, she tells me that unknowingly my speech gets very faster. So any one of you, if you have noticed something, please do let me know.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Fahmida, thank you very much for this kind effort. And we will, inshallah, continue this teaching activity occasionally. And at Telegram group, everyone is post questions about hypertension and feedback. And then we will conduct second section at remaining topics at hypertension. Is that okay?
Thank you so much, my dear. And thank you, Dr. Hira, for giving me this opportunity. Actually, I have been doing this with my friends and with my colleagues and all. We choose one guideline, we discuss among ourselves. But suppose if we do at this stage, at this step, it will be helpful, especially for our community, for our people, those who are not able to manage very high-fi courses or something like that. So this will be a kind of help for them as well.
Yes, sure, Dr. Fahmida. We are very honored to have such a beautiful vice at Medhome board, and who is MRCOG and at the same time MRCPI. And we will continue to take your sessions, inshallah.
Inshallah. So if all agree, tomorrow 6 p.m. again the same time, 6 p.m. Pakistani time.